Okay, celebrating the red is not quite as blatant as it sounds. When you say celebrate the red, I'm happy we're red. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when we're not meeting the expectations or the visual management board is red, instead of coming in blaming, we create an environment where it's safe to talk about the red and put those items on the table to discuss those things. And it's not hiding the dead fish, right? It's going to eventually start to smell. It's about putting the dead fish on the table, having the transparent conversation. It's safe, and celebrating the red means you're going to get help if needed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Swan.
And I'm Tracy O'Rourke.
And we're from GoingSixSigma.com, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast, where we wrestle with tough questions, talk to thought leaders, discuss great books with great authors, and get insights from Lean Six Sigma practitioners.
And we let you in on helpful apps, bring you the news, and challenge the status quo so you can build your problem-solving muscles. So, Elizabeth, I think there's some miso soup on today's menu today, isn't there?
Yes. Arigato gozaimasu, Tracy. This is an excellent and exciting podcast. Today's special is your interview with the phenomenal Billy Taylor, the Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Goodyear. And then we get to tell our listeners about our trip to Japan, which is fascinating, stunning, and wonderful.
And what?
What? And then for Q&A, we're going to answer a learner's question about leaders who think data collection is a waste of time. And for the printed page, we'll discuss a book whose author believes that the output of a business is crap. And we get to meet the author, or we got to meet the author. It is truly a great day at the cafe, Tracy.
Yes, it is. Can't wait. Remember to stay tuned for this month's coupon code in order to get a discount on GoLeanSixSigma.com online training.
Time to tell everybody about Japan.
Yes. We just went halfway around the world with Katie Anderson, and it was amazing.
So true. This trip was organized by Katie Anderson. It was a great mix of fellow travelers. It was multicultural. There were people from Holland, from Australia, from Chile, and the U.S. It was a great gender mix. We had tons, more than half women leaders and practitioners. We got to see the Toyota production system in action. We got to see Toyota suppliers, hospitals, schools. We got to stay in a traditional inn up in the mountains called a ryokan, and with hot springs, which are called onsens. And we got to have karaoke. Tracy, you took some great videos of the karaoke. I especially like the one where it rocks back from side to side.
Thankfully, we're not posting any of those on LinkedIn. Sorry, folks. You had to be there for those experiences.
No.
But, what I really liked about this trip was it was very well organized. It was jam-packed with seeing all of these places and talking to really important higher-ups in these organizations. We always had to have a Japanese translator, of course. But, Katie, she knows a lot of people there. We got to hang out with Mr. Yoshino for more than half of the entire time that we were there. And I really loved the mix and the blend of lean tours in organizations that we expect to see lean, like Toyota and its suppliers, but then also seeing how the Japanese culture is very influential by going to schools, the hospital, as you said, and then having some really nice traditional exposure. That was one of my favorite days was when we stayed at the ryokan and we got to have Japanese dinner in our yukatas and, of course, sing karaoke with some sake in those yukatas as well. I bought 3 for my own use when I get home, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I would highly recommend this trip to anyone that wants to get exposure to Japanese culture and how they apply lean.
Yeah, and I will reiterate, shopping with Tracy, it's go big or go home. So a lot of these yukatas, which are basically the cotton version of the kimono, which she said we got to wear, and they are beautiful. I did get to wear those myself. But the other thing was we we jump back into American lives, but I feel like I'm still impacted by the Japanese culture. One thing that really struck me was I had a different idea of what the bowing was about before I got over there. And I thought, okay, you do this deferential bowing, but it really was about eye contact and acknowledgement of other people. And it made a huge difference, because if we were on a tour and we're walking in the painted lane of where you're allowed to walk, really good visual management, and we could see 10, 15 feet away, there's somebody operating a big press. They're busy. We can't walk over there. It's too dangerous, and they're busy. But you could have a moment where you both had eye contact and each of you gave a slight bow. Sometimes there was a slight smile, and it was an acknowledgement both on our side, like, thanks for letting us tour, and on their side, thanks for honoring us and coming to see how we do things.
Yes, that is wonderful.
We have handshakes, we have waving, and neither would have been appropriate when I was acknowledging the worker who was using the press. But the slight bow, the slight acknowledgement is a great way to connect with people. A wave would have been no good, and a handshake would have been no good. So that stuck with me, and I find myself giving people more eye contact, slight smile, just acknowledging people around me, whether it's, the person who's just checking me into a hotel or just served lunch, doesn't matter. It feels like a really nice piece of the culture.
Yeah, I do feel the same. There's impressions that I've brought with me. A lot of it is around the food, actually. The portion sizes are so much smaller. And, I went to a restaurant and we got back, and it looked like my meal was for 4 people. So, there's a lot of impressions I had about things. But the food was, we eat every day, 3 times a day. And the quality of the food was amazing and healthy. I don't think I had any junk food while I was there, except I did go into a couple of the Japanese bakeries. But I think one of the most impactful things for me was we went to Ina Foods. We, was really learning about the Japanese culture at this particular organization. We got to talk to the chairman, Mr. Tsukakoshi, who is the son of the author of Tree Ring Management. And although we got to talk to him too, the author, so that was awesome. But we started asking a bunch of questions about how they measured engagement. And, well, do you survey your employees? And at first I thought it was a language issue. It seemed like he didn't really understand the question. And I assumed it was because of this language barrier. And I actually didn't think the questions were answered very well. And then it hit me because he said something like, well, I don't understand the question. Why would I survey my family? Why would I survey, do you survey your son at home for employee satisfaction? And that question back to us completely changed my paradigm, and it made me realize, wow, we are trying to force fit what we know about our work culture. And we're asking these questions that don't make any sense. They have lifetime employment there. They look at these employees as their family. People show up 30 minutes early just to clean. It was truly amazing to sort of get that paradigm shift and realize that, our view blocks learning sometimes. And that was a huge impression of one of many impressions, actually, of going on this tour.
Tracy, your observation stuck with me because the next tour was of a hospital that was recently built. It was built to withstand earthquakes, and it also was built to incorporate a lot of what they'd learned about flow, patient flow, and how to incorporate lean aspects for patients and doctors and staff. And again, we got to the hospice wing, and there were no tubes. There was no visible lines. And we asked about it, and they said in the hospice wing, they don't want people to have to see the equipment, the machinery, keeping them alive. And that, again, flies in the face of hospital tours I've had in the past where we look at everything's visual, everything's visible. and you can see supplies, you can see the levels, you can see equipment, you can get equipment. And here the purpose was, let's make the patient feel comfortable and at home. So they had the ability to hide the mirror, right? When they felt like they were growing thin and they didn't want to see their reflection. And it reminded me, oh, get back to the purpose. The purpose is about the patient. And they had a really cool set of chairs and a table that could transform into a cot. They also had a kitchen nearby where family members could cook familiar food for patients. And that was just, again, a revelation or just a reminder. You can't always reinforce your assumptions about, how to use these elements of lean onto other cultures.
Yes, I would agree. It did bust our assumptions. Immediately when we walked into the room, I have to admit, I walked in and said, well, where is everything? I can't see anything. There's no visual management here. And I actually sort of said, in my mind, I was thinking, they're not as far along on the journey as we are in America. Because you go to a hospital here, you see everything. It's all visual management. But again, they're thinking of the patient. The patient doesn't want to see that. It looked like a living room. It really did. It looked like you just walked into somebody's living room, and maybe we need to be thinking about things from the patient perspective. So again, another aha on, great. It's visual management for everybody that works there, but what is that doing to the patient?
Yeah.
And
What's the purpose?
Healing, right? The healing process and feeling sick. And one of the people that was with us, as you had stated earlier, her mother was in the hospital, and there was a mirror that she had to look in every day. It wasn't movable. And this mirror was movable. If people didn't want to look at themselves and see themselves in a state of what they would consider sick, they just removed it. And that was pretty amazing.
That was amazing. And then when we got back onto the bus, we would talk about, as a group, what are our reflections from the hospital, the plant, the school, like what did we take away? And for a couple of the rides, many of them, we had Isao Yoshino with us, another good friend of Katie's. And he's the man who hired John Shook to help start the first Toyota General Motors joint venture. That's back in the 80s in Northern California, called NUMMI, or the NUMMI plant. It's a huge success story. They took a plant that had closed and they reopened it with the original workers. They applied Japanese management principles, and they thrived. And Mr. Yoshino was the model for the character of Mr. Sanders in John Shook's seminal book called Managing to Learn. And Mr. Yoshino spent time talking to us on the bus. He told us stories. He went on tours with us. He had dinner with us. He was great. He had to leave occasionally for meetings, and we always missed him. And we were like, well, when are you coming back? When are you going to come back and talk to us? When are you going to hang with us? And by the end of the trip, he told Katie he had such a great time with our group, and her, of course, that he wants to join us for the whole trip next time. So that's awesome. I know the next
that's great for them.
It is.
I would have loved to have seen Mr. Yoshino do some karaoke.
Oh, we missed, yeah, and in a yukata. That would have been good to see. You could have videotaped him, Tracy, and maybe, I don't know, you could have kept the camera stable this time. Yeah, back to track here. So we also got to meet female leaders. Now, it is very striking in Japan. It is definitely a male-dominated culture, way more so than in the U.S. But we got to spend time with female leaders again, because Katie has built these wonderful relationships. One of the women that joined us on the bus, I'm going to call her Nami-san. She's in her 70s. And she told us about her journey to leadership positions. A great story about her name. She decided to get divorced when she was young, which was really not done. But her parents were really supportive of her because she had a good job. But when she got divorced, she wanted to keep her name because Nami, if you can recognize that sound from tsunami, which is a tidal wave, she said in her name it was a river wave. It was powerful, and she wanted to hold on to that part of her name, which I just love that. And we met other female leaders which were just phenomenal. Katie did a great job of just bringing us the culture, the people, and it was just nonstop soaking up incredible experiences.
Absolutely incredible experiences. So happy, and I feel blessed that I was able to participate in that. And the good news is for all of you out there, if you want to do this experience, Katie's going to be doing it again next year. in May 2020. I would love to go again, but I don't think I'll get a chance to. And she may even have another one she might do 2 trips next year. So keep your eyes out. We're going to be helping her promote it because we think it's amazing.
Amazing.
I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast.
Up next, it's Q&A. So we've got a leader totally uninterested in data, right, Tracy?
Yes, absolutely. So the question today is, how do you gain the support of a project leader who feels the data collection is tedious and unnecessary?
I usually say if there's no leadership support, there's not much of a chance of success with improvement efforts. Find a new project leader, choose something the leader feels is worthwhile, but scrap it, move on. But the learner specifically mentioned data collection. The leader felt it was a waste of time, and it could lead to some experiments. So I'm assuming the data had to be manually collected, and therefore the resistance to using resources to get manually collected data. But depending on the process, this person could take some initiative and collect, a day of data, a week of data, depending on how many units flow through the process in a given time period. And that may be a way to show the value of the data. If it's cycle time, it doesn't take much to show the average cycle time of a process. If it's defect data, you could include some notes on the reasons that things went wrong or some root cause data. And then you get to create a Pareto. And those things are useful. And people tend to take notice and appreciate them. Or you could go in the other direction and really find out why the leader thinks data collection is not worth it. Is the root cause and solution obvious? Should this just be a quick win? It could be an opportunity for experimentation. Ask and find out what this project leader is thinking. Inquiry is always a really good way to go.
I would absolutely agree with that, Elizabeth. I think figuring out why this person, this leader in particular, feels that way. Do they feel that way in general, or is it specific to the task at hand? I would be very surprised around a leader saying that we're not going to collect data, because typically leaders are the ones that are always telling their people, bring me data, don't bring me your opinion, show me that this really is a problem. If we had leaders that had teams of people always using data to make decisions, doesn't that make their job easier? Because often people aren't doing that. They're coming to their leaders with their opinion, not necessarily fact-based. And to me, it just doesn't make any sense that a leader wouldn't want their people using data. That kind of blows my mind. The other thing that blows my mind about this is, if this is a leader that is supposed to be supporting DMAIC, this is a step. Why would you not support this approach if people in the organization are doing process improvement and they're following DMAIC? So that's also surprising to me. So they're, by saying that are not supporting it is sort of saying, it's flying in the face of the whole method, which is unfortunate. So, and I always like to say, sometimes leaders, they get caught up in, timing and constraints and resources. And that really puts someone that is reporting to them in an uncomfortable position. They have to kind of remind them, well, we are doing this and this is the method. So why wouldn't we collect the data? And again, we're back to why. Why do they feel this way?
Great question. And that's why the learner asked it, probably like, what do I do? Why is this happening? But if you've got a question like this, please post it in our forum. We will answer it. We have Master Black Belts answering it. You have colleagues that will be answering. So the forum's available to you. Go ahead and post your questions there. I'm Elizabeth Swan, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. In a short while, we'll get to hear Tracy's interview with Billy Taylor, the global head of diversity and inclusion at Goodyear. But first, it's the printed page.
So the output of a business is crap, C-R-A-P, Elizabeth?
Yes, apparently so. We are reviewing the book Tree Ring Management by Hiroshi Tsukakoshi. And the premise of the book is that the mission of his company is employee happiness. He considers profit a byproduct. He even used the word excrement, and then he tried the word crap. I think we know where he's going. But the title refers to his belief in slow growth. like the rings of a tree. The company grows a little bit each year. He avoids anything that might cause a spike since he sees that as unsustainable. And what's amazing about this book, aside from his theories, is that we got to go meet the author and tour Ina Foods, which is the company he's writing about.
Yes. So again, huge kudos to Katie Anderson for helping coordinate this. I don't think this was on the original schedule. And she got us into Ina Foods. She got us a tour. She told us about tree ring management and said, read it. And then the author himself, who is 83 years old, very rare to meet him, he came and talked to us for a little while, and that was awesome.
Awesome. We got to ask him questions through our own fabulous interpreter, Mami-san. She was with us the entire time. You almost forget because she was so smooth. You just had an earpiece and you were constantly listening to her voice, her soft voice as these guys spoke. So that was wonderful. And he signed my book. It's the only book I have signed by an author in Japanese characters. So it's a beautiful signature. And his views put him in the minority. But what's fascinating is that Toyota sends people regularly to learn from him and his company, Ina Foods, and to take tours. And just to give you a little background on what they do, they make something called kantan. It's a powder or a gelatin, comes in different forms, but it's from brown seaweed. And they make about 200 different products with it. They have an incredible R&D sector, and they're constantly coming up with new ways to use this gelatin. It's a lot of food additives. It's also, if you've worked in a lab, it might be the base, that agar base that they're growing specimens on. They sell by mail order direct to their customers. And we got to go to tour the company, and you can see it's visible. They're focused on employee happiness, isn't it, Tracy?
Yes. So they are very community focused. They have a wonderful space. Everything is beautiful. They have gardens that are visited by 350,000 visitors every year. They have an art gallery. They have an artisan space to sell crafts. And like I said earlier, even their employees just come and clean for 30 minutes as a standard. They're not even paid to do that because there's so much engagement and respect for the organization, the grounds. You really feel it. And it was really kind of an amazing thing to go there.
That's a good point. There is no cleaning crew. They don't separate like you people clean and you people do work. Everybody cleans. As you said, they have a shed with all the tools in it to work on the garden. People love to work on that garden, and it's huge, and there are walkways everywhere. It's gorgeous. And they can take the tools home and use them on their own. So that kind of holistic approach to the organization really struck me. And on the same token, or by the same token, all their kaizens are focused on employee comfort. How can we make work more comfortable? So we toured the factory, and it's well lit. You can see that in action. He's aware that you have to make money. He knows that you have to keep the company alive because that enables him to make employees happy, but it's a balance. It also means that he'll never take the company public. His benchmark is companies that have been around 500 years. His goal is endurance. And the stock market focuses or forces companies to focus on short-term growth only. It forces quarterly earnings reports. And he believes that that's the reason for so many failing startups. And it's his reasoning is very sound. It's great to reflect on. I feel like the whole kind of undercurrent of our trip was reflection, really thinking about how do they do this and how are they viewing people and companies. And the focus on people was really striking, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And your comment about how he focuses on companies that have lasted over 500 years. So one of the other things that struck me about going there is every employee that he meets, he actually shares a 100-year calendar and asks them what year they're going to die. And the idea behind this is to recognize that your time is limited on this earth. And so what are you going to do at that time? And a lot of people on this tour walked away with the action item of getting a 100-year calendar. And I have to say, on my 100-year calendar, half of it's already gone. So I got to figure out what I'm going to do the next the next 50 years or so, because it was very thought provoking to really make it so concrete how many years you actually have on this earth and what are you going to do with that time.
Yeah. Yeah, more than half of mine's gone. my Graham lived to 99, but I should be so lucky. So yeah, this was incredible. Great reflections. Please check out the full review on our website about tree ring management. And Tracy and I will continue to publish blogs about our experience and the places that we went to on Katie's tour. Highly recommend both the book and the tour.
It's time to announce the coupon code.
This code's for 20% off any of our Lean Six Sigma training and certification courses. That's white belt, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, and lean training.
If you've joined us at the Just in Time Cafe, just use coupon code 20GRAY. That's 20GRAY during checkout. Make sure to use it soon since the coupon code will expire at the end of July.
And here's a fun fact. When you spell gray with an A, that's the American usage. When you spell gray with an E, that's the English usage. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, I learned.
Interesting.
Coming up next, it's today's special. Tracy, give us a little preview of your interview with Billy Taylor.
So Billy Taylor is one incredibly dynamic person. He spoke at the AME conference last year. I had the pleasure of meeting him last year, and what a fireball. He had the room standing, clapping. And he has really powerful messages about how he gets work done at Goodyear. And I really enjoyed seeing him speak. And I asked him if he wanted to do an interview with me about some of the things that they're doing at Goodyear to sustain continuous improvement. He's now in a new role in diversity and inclusion, but he's carrying a lot of the messages with that frame of mind to still continue his work.
Great interview.
Okay, I'd like to welcome our guest for today's special, Billy Taylor. Very energetic, lots of people following this guy. I had the pleasure of seeing him at the AME conference last year as keynote, and I posted a couple things on LinkedIn, pictures, and I got 8,000 views of my post of you, Billy. I couldn't believe it. So Billy is from Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. He has had many roles at Goodyear. His current role is the global head of diversity and inclusion at Goodyear. He's been at Goodyear since 1989, and he's progressed through a series of leadership positions, serving in executive operations positions as plant manager and director capacities in several union and non-union production facilities, and has led Goodyear's largest and most complex tire production sites. He's also a Six Sigma Master Black Belt, a Lean Sensei, an avid operational excellence, a global practitioner, and currently Billy is leading D&I, diversity and inclusion strategies across the 22 countries where Goodyear operates. But what I love about Billy, because you definitely have an impressive resume here, you're passionate about building strong internal teams, productive community partnerships, and creating an environment where all 64,000 employees have an opportunity to contribute at their highest level. Welcome to the cafe, Billy. Can I buy you a cup of coffee?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And I'm humbled. And like you said, I enjoyed our initial meeting at AME. I think I was with my younger brother.
You were with your younger brother. Yes.
Yeah. And I took a picture with the both of us, and just your approach and your demeanor was definitely, it put us in a comfort level where we were definitely engaged in conversation. So it was an honor, and when you called and reached out to me to be a part of the show.
Well, thank you. I was so happy to meet your brother. You guys were in town in San Diego visiting. Did you end up staying in town for a little while and seeing some of the sites?
Yes, we did. We stayed for a couple of days and just walked around and just got a chance to get reconnected. He lives in Texas and I live in Ohio, so he flew up just for the event and to support me. And so it gave us an opportunity to reconnect.
Oh, that's great. And do you guys get to do that very often, or was that just once in a blue moon?
Well, It was once in a blue moon, as he has his own company in Dallas, and so we use that venue to connect. And actually, we're going to reconnect at the end of the month. I'm speaking in Australia, and he's going to fly to Australia to reconnect again.
That sounds awesome. Gonna have a couple of beers in Australia.
Yes.
So I'm really anxious to hear about your new role, and I'd love to hear your perspective on how cultural diversity plays a role in a thriving continuous improvement culture. So tell us what's been going on with you and what you've been learning since you've taken on this new role.
What's been interesting, because I come from a distinct background of operations, being in manufacturing, leading plants, large and small scale, union and union free. And what was consistent in all of those organizations or plants was that people think, feel, and do. And when you're talking culture, I really believe culture controls strategy, no matter how you look at it. And so, but being in operations, it was more direct, hands-on, commanding, control, some influence, but influence from a standpoint of leaders getting people to engage. In my new role in human resources, it's a lot about service and support. And so moving into my new role from operations into human resource, it was very eye-opening and enlightening to myself that the strategies and processes and tools used in operations to create a lean culture was very valid in this human resource space. And when I looked at our journey, our strategy roadmap, how we win, how we work, and where we focus. And I think that's the extreme clarity piece that must take place. And so moving to a new role, we started to implement a center of excellence for D&I, and initially met with not resistance, but lack of understanding. And once we started to roll out the process, and one of the lessons I learned early was do it with the team, not to the team.
Yes.
And so we started with this moniker, why, we, you, then how.
So tell us more about that. Why? You said why?
The why is the extreme clarity around our purpose and what are we doing and what do we want to achieve. And that clear message and that clear strategy around why the organization, the why we're doing it, the strategy roadmap. That was important to get people on board and start to build evangelists. And I call it lean evangelists. People are going to go out and endorse and spread the word and also give practical examples. And so when we start strategy deployment, and most have heard about Hoshin Connery, but also you can't manage a secret. And if you use a Hoshin Connery and just stop at the X matrix, then the X matrix at some point becomes a secret because it's either in your laptop, your computer, or it's on your wall. And it never really makes it to the shop floor. And so that's when we looked at the why, get the clear purpose, the we, how do we collectively as an enterprise, right, embrace the strategy and the purpose, and then the you, what's your part? How do you impact it? And then when we start to really get into the how, doing it with the team, you are part of the how. You are part of the overall operating, the daily management system, the how we do it. And so when you connect all four of those, I mean, success for me, in my experience, have been relatively easy when we get those four right.
You know, that's really insightful because I find that people don't necessarily always know the why, right? People know what the company does, but they don't necessarily know why they're doing it or what's important right now. And the fact that you connect the we, the you, and the how, I find that organizations don't do that very well. They don't necessarily break it down to say, this is how you can contribute to why we're doing this. And absolutely. I love that. So what was the impact when you started to have that mantra?
Initially, we thought it was going to be an initial push to get our employee resource groups, our ERGs, engaged, using the same processes and systems to drive OpEx in manufacturing. It immediately went to a pull. They were pulling me, they were pulling the team, and the extreme ownership that took place was mind blowing. And what I realized is if you get the why right and you involve the we and the you, that becomes contagious. And I believe behaviors are contagious. When you're building evangelism around what you're doing and getting people to buy in as a lean practitioner or a sensei, behaviors become contagious. I use example, if you've ever went to had dinner or a meal at Texas Roadhouse or Lone Star Restaurant. I'm originally from Texas. You walk into the restaurant, there's this big barrel of peanuts, and you eat the peanuts, and then you throw the shells on the floor. You eat the peanuts, and you keep throwing the shells on the floor. Now, my initial visit to that restaurant, one of those restaurants, was, wow, there's a safety hazard, there's a slip hazard, people throwing shells on the floor. And by the third visit, what am I doing? Throwing shells on the floor. And what are others throwing shells on the floor? And so it's the same when you get into operational excellence. What you accept becomes the norm, and people start to replicate that behavior because it's contagious. And so as we went into our ERGs, when we started to engage with our ERGs and we started to involve them into the process, doing it with them, and had a strong case of the why we were doing it, it became contagious.
Yes.
It became contagious.
So first of all, what's an ERG? Just so our audience knows what that is.
It's an employee resource group. It's spread around demographics and respecting differences. And it's about having you've heard a common language. We don't seek a common language. It's around a common meaning. And it's respecting differences of others. And I like it when I walk if I fly to Latin America and I get off of a plane, they say, hola. If I fly to New York, it's hello. In Texas, it's a different language in itself. If I get off a plane in Texas, they'll probably say howdy, but they all mean hello. And it's a common meaning. And so what we have here are employee resource groups that are part of our next gen, 40 and under group. Hola, Latino, Hispanic population, Goodyear Black Network, Goodyear Veterans Associations, Goodyear Women's Network. We have a group called Hero, LGBT community. We're all into one purpose, respecting the differences of others. And that's what you get when you're having lean operation. When you go to the shop floor, there are differences, but the why is the same overall.
Yes.
In common meaning.
Yeah. So I think what I just heard loud and clear is cultural diversity, playing a role in continuous improvement culture. It's respecting others. It's respecting differences. It's appreciating differences. I really love that. That message is really important. And sadly, we don't see that everywhere. I'm in all kinds of organizations and I see disrespect happening and people don't even know it's disrespect sometimes. And that's unfortunate. So that's nice to hear. So my question is, you had mentioned behaviors become contagious, especially in an operational excellence environment. How do leaders model the way at Goodyear? What are some of these behaviors that you're seeing leaders do at Goodyear to promote this continuous improvement culture?
Well, Goodyear has a strong culture for education and development. And so what we do from a leadership perspective, we have boot camps where leaders are required to come in, and those behaviors that the company would like to see exhibited are modeled. We also have governance on, okay, here's what we said we're going to do, and are we doing what we said we're going to do? And so from those boot camps, that starts the education and understanding of what behaviors we'd like to see exhibited, benchmarked against companies that have demonstrated those behaviors. And also the routine visits or gimbal walks as we go to the floor. And we partner, we watch each other. We audit and observe others that are doing it well. So therefore, we know what good looks like. And when good's not exhibited, then we celebrate the red, right? We don't bow up or blame. What we do is saying, how do we close those constraints? And it's safe. Goodyear creates an environment that's safe as you start to model the way. And so there's consistent observations and reviews of what managers and leaders do and how they treat the people on the floor and vice versa, creating an inclusive culture for leaders as well as associates on the floor. Very
interesting. So this boot camp for leaders, is this something that leaders go through once a year? Once, is it sort of an introductory when a new leader comes on board? Is it more regular in terms of frequency? And typically, how long is boot camp for leaders?
So boot camps, there's different levels of not just boot camps for leaders, boot camps for senseis and boot camps for practitioners that take place as well. For a leader, a boot camp is a week long. Mm-hmm. And so you go through getting a better understanding of the tools and application of tools and expected behaviors to be exhibited and how the process works. And so you go through that boot camp initially, and then you have 6-month reviews of that process because there's a governance committee, or I would say policy deployment committee, that says if something changes, you have to be brought back up to speed on what those changes were since you last went through the boot camp.
Interesting. So they learn how to celebrate the red. I go into all different kinds of organizations as a consultant, and my favorite thing is to actually observe culture. And seeing red on the wall and then seeing how people react to that is very interesting. Yeah. So, sometimes I go and there's no red on the walls at all. Well, what does that say? Right. And so what does that tell you about the culture? People could be afraid to have red up there. Or what does the manager do when they see red up there? So tell us what you guys do to celebrate the red. What does that look like?
Okay, celebrating the red, it's not quite as blatant as it sounds when you say celebrate the red. I'm happy we're red. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when we're not meeting the expectations or the visual management board is red, instead of coming in blaming, we create an environment where it's safe to talk about the red and put those items on the table to discuss those things. And it's not hiding the dead fish, right? That's going to eventually start to smell. It's about putting the dead fish on the table, having the transparent conversation. It's safe, and celebrating the red means you're going to get help if needed. And so, but you're going to be, it's around extreme ownership of that issue, but it's creating an environment where it's safe and you're comfortable and you like to bring those things to the table and you can shut a line down to get the root cause or the root issue resolved versus just running to hit numbers or running. Right, you're avoiding or you're not addressing quality concerns. Celebrating the red is dealing with the issue at hand, and it's safe. Mm-hmm. And you get rewarded for doing the right thing versus being rewarded for hitting a number.
Good. So when they do the right thing, how are they rewarded?
One of the things, there's several processes that take place as they come out and review projects. We have work simplification. That means that's a review of something that someone did to simplify or improve their work area, where the area team comes out and recognize that event and recognize that team. And more so, it's recognizing the process more so the individual, right? Because you don't want to create arsonists. People that are setting fires to be recognized. So those that have caught an issue because it was out of process or processes were not being adhered to, those get immediate recognition because you want to set the tone, right? Set the behavior. You want to establish a behavior where people are going to embrace the process. And so we recognize those individuals. We also recognize people for their contribution. And that's, if it's in a plant manager will personally have a person come and present to their senior leadership team. What was the root cause and how do they deal with it? And then how do they follow up to sustain the gain? And so we take opportunities to go outside the norm. Now, there is written processes or standard work on how to do so, but the saying is make people visible and they'll make you valuable.
Now, you've mentioned this a couple times, Billy. You mentioned this concept of extreme ownership. So tell us more about what that means and why that is something that you emphasize.
Well, extreme ownership, I'm going to start with, my mother used to say this all the time as well. In the absence of ownership comes blame. And if individuals and teams do not know what they own inside the process, inside the strategy, when something goes wrong, you will get blamed. People will blame. But when people know what they own, you have a high probability of being successful or the issue that's constraining the organization being surfaced. There was a study done at Stanford, I think the Hawthorne effect. When they lowered the lights, production went up. When they raised the lights, production went up. It's a part where people, when they were being observed or felt that they were being paid attention to, production was at its peak. Mm-hmm. When people weren't, production started to decrease. And it's around that extreme ownership piece when people feel that they are valued and they know what they own, and you have a feedback mechanism, people will give you their best. Now, in my keynotes, I do a part where I prove to people that this is true, and I have them stand up and I do the exercise and says we're going to exercise, and I said 90% of you are going to fail.
Yeah, I remember.
Remember? And 5% of you are going to blame me. And then when I won, and I said, standard work, on the count of 3, you're going to clap. And they're watching me as a leader. And we go through the series of events, and I say 1, 2, and then I clap on 2 before I get to 3. And the majority of the audience claps on 2 when I clearly asked the audience to clap on 3. And when I asked, why did you clap on 2 when I clearly asked you to clap on 3? And the answer is because you did. And first I say, so people follow what you do, behaviors, before they follow what you say. Is that what you're telling me? And the audience replies, yes. And then I ask, wow, you clapped on 2 because of me? Or you clapped on 2 because you could not focus? And then the audience says, well, and I said, no, I'm not trying to come down on you or question you, but a great team that has a lean culture, and my teams, I would like my teammate to come back to me and say, Billy, you clearly said clap on 3, but you clapped on 2. Are you bigger than the process? And now that's a safe environment, right? That's fertile for change. And so if people don't know what they own, they're going to clap on 2. They're going to clap on 1 when your standard work says we are going to clap on 3. But you don't have an environment, or you haven't created an environment that's conducive to do so. And lean journeys that I've been a part of, and I've been on this journey for years, a lot of them have been tool-based. We were selling the latest and greatest tool, and we were looking for a problem to fit our tool. We have this brand new A3 process. We have this new Six Sigma process. Let's do Kaizen events. And we were looking for problems to fit our tool versus a culture to address our situation, our issue, which in that culture, we had the capability to use these tools around Six Sigma or Kaizen events. But if you don't have ownership, failure is probable. Mm-hmm. If people don't know what they own, You're not going to build a culture of ownership, a culture where people strive to succeed individually and collectively.
So if you had some advice for a leader to try to build a culture of extreme ownership, might they begin? What would be some of the things to think about, or some key ideas or concepts that they really should be spending some time thinking through?
I've had the opportunity to go into some organizations that weren't running well, particularly Fayetteville, North Carolina. First, seek to understand before you seek to change.
Mm-hmm.
Take time, especially in the first 2 weeks or so, seek to understand, seek to change. And then at that point, focus on your structure and your capability. And when you assess those two things, now you can move into your strategy, because the worst thing you can do is go in and start implementing strategy and implementing systems when you don't have the capability nor the resources to execute. Mm-hmm. And there you're going to do more damage than you do good, or you progress. And then after that, once you assess what your structure and your capability is, and then I would say clearly work on your why, right? Your purpose map. Now, we use a process. We have what's called a purpose map or a why chart, where we talk about initially what's our why, but what are the internal and external factors that would constrain you from hitting your why. And then before you jump to KPIs, focus on KPAs, your key performance actions, not your key performance indicators. And when you build your system of strategy deployment, your strategy deployment mindset as well as forward look should be around key performance actions. Let me give you an example. If I want to lose weight, do I stand on the scale every morning and look down and say, why aren't I losing weight? What's wrong? Or do I focus on KPAs, which are, I'm going to watch my calorie intake. I'm going to create a workout routine. I'm going to not eat after 8 p.m. And if I do these things right, I have a high probability of achieving my end goal, my KPI. So when you're starting your journey on a lean transformation, don't get so caught up in the end game, which is the KPI. Focus on the KPA as you're building your transformation process or your lean strategy roadmap. Mm-hmm. It should be based and focused on your KPAs, right? Mm-hmm. How we win, how we work, behaviors, and where are we going to focus? Mm-hmm. So and if you nail, you put those in places, I believe, again, you have a high probability of not only leading a transformation, but sustaining that transformation and with governance.
So you mentioned a lot of things that I'm sure that our audience wants to learn more about. One of them a little earlier, you mentioned a purpose map. Do a purpose map. How would our audience learn more about what a purpose map is and how they would go about building one?
I'll start what a purpose map is. It's really your strategy on a page. And it is a very simple format where you clearly state what you believe is your compelling why or your goal, all right? Your goal statement. Mm-hmm. Below that, let's picture in your mind a why coming down from that goal statement. And it's going to point, the pitch part is going to be what external, it's kind of like a SWOT analysis. What external factors would prohibit you from achieving your goal? What internal factors that may prohibit you from achieving your goals? From there, and this is a team discussion, it's not an individual leader. From there, you move to thinking about a KPA, not a KPI. Then you say, okay, what are the key performance actions that must take place for me to achieve that goal of it that we've identified up front. And then the last piece are the things you're going to measure that will be your keys to success. And then from that, once you build your purpose map, and now the process starts of a strategy deployment where you start to build, and we call them our dashboard or KPA dashboard, which shifts to extreme ownership and who owns what. But from that, there's a whole separate process around ownership and trending. And then from that, it's around action registers. But the high level is the purpose map is critical to defining your true north. And it's simple. And what happens is once you start to, and I'll go over one just at a high level. Okay. And let's use the example of I'm looking at a flip chart. So we're selling flip charts. Okay. Mm-hmm. Our goal is to produce the best flip chart on time, at cost, at quality, at cost. Okay. And that's our goal statement. What's the internal factors? Getting raw materials. External factors, raw materials. Internal factors, raw material flow. All right. What are some of the keys to success? Safety, quality, delivery, cost. And now I start to say, who owns all of those, right? From an ownership perspective, the we. Now let's move into safety. There comes another why chart or purpose map. So why do we want, what are the keys to success and safety? Risk identification, KPA. Risk mitigation, KPA. Compliance to standards, KPA. Investing in ergonomics, KPA. If I do all of those things correct, do I have a high probability of achieving my safety goals? Absolutely. I've eliminated all of my risk. I'm in compliance to standards from government regulations. I'm also improving the condition of my environment. And if I do all of these things, will my people be safe? High probability, yes. Same thing, quality purpose map. Well, my equipment do I have a specification to deliver the end game? Yes, KPA. Does my equipment have the capability to produce to that spec? Yes, KPA. Are my operators following that spec as designed? Yes. Okay, if I do those 3 KPAs, do I have a high probability achieving the quality expectation of my customer? Absolutely.
Very good example. Thank you for that. That's very specific. That gives people a great example of how to process that. Thank you. I can't believe we're almost out of time. I have another question for you. So I, like I said, had the pleasure of seeing you speak at AME, but you've also spoke at a number of events in North America, Latin America, Europe, Asia, Iceland. You're headed to Australia again. You've spoken for the International Shingo Conference. You've spoken at the Canadian Manufacturing Excellence Industry Week, the U.S. Army, the University of Washington. Where are you going to be speaking this year besides Australia? Because you said you were going there already. Where if people want to come see you speak, where else might they find you?
Well, I'm like I said, I'm going to Australia. I'm speaking at an event, the AME Australia, and I think I'm working on an event in September for an automotive conference in Detroit. And at this point, I'm moving into the new role, so I've limited my speaking engagement due to putting this process in place, and it's getting a lot of my energy, a lot of my team's focus, because we believe it's a breakthrough. Our initial feedback and engagement and results has taken me away from the speaking circuit, so to speak. And I'm doing an event here locally in Akron. It's called Heart to Heart. And it's really about culture and people, and it's around everything that matters. I believe, and I know for a fact, based on my career, it's important that you measure what matters. You hear that a lot. Measure what matters. Measure what matters. What I've learned through operational excellence and lean that although it's very important that you measure what matters, but it's critical that you embrace the fact that everything that matters cannot be measured. And people miss that. And I'll close with my son brought me to tears. He played basketball for St. Vincent St. Mary's High School, where LeBron James actually played. And the eve of the state championship game, he called me to his hotel lobby and he informed me that this would be his last game ever playing on an organized team. And he did not want to go to college and play. He clearly knew what True North was for him and what he wanted to do in life. But he shared a story with me. He says, Dad, every day we went to the gym at 5:30 a.m. prior to you going to work. And we put up 300 shots a day, Monday through Friday. And our goal was to hit 60% minimum. And we were going to measure his progress. And he did very well, became a very, very good three-point shooter. But the last day we were to shoot, I had to leave and come back to work for a meeting. And he actually shot 85%, 87%, somewhere in that range. And he called me on the phone. He says, Dad, and he talked to me. He says, I had a great day. And I'm like, well, what happened? He says, I shot 87%. I said, well, you don't sound happy about that. He says, Dad, you weren't here and it felt empty.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Dad, me coming to the gym was never about basketball. And he says, what mattered most is you spending time with me, your value proposition with me. And he says, Dad, that's what means more than anything, whether you're a leader of a company, whether you're a parent, because Dad, I won't remember all the games you came to, but I'll never forget the ones you missed. And you didn't miss many. And he says, to me, that's what this is about. And when they won the state championship, he didn't run to cut the nets down. He didn't run over there to grab the trophy. I see him even in my eyes right now. He ran to the ropes or the rails where I was standing, and he called me down to the rail, and we probably cried 3 minutes hugging each other. Mm. And in life, I believe most leaders, most even lean leaders, we get so caught up in the KPI and instead of embracing the key performance actions. And if you embrace both, you'll not only be working on your resume, you'll be working on your obituary at the same time.
Mm. Oh, that is such a poignant story. Thank you for sharing. And I need to spend some more time with my son. How that made me feel. Oh, well, thank you. And so you are going to be spending some more family time with your brother. Do your kids ever get to go with you on the road?
Yes, actually, I engaged all of my family. My son and daughter. My daughter's actually, when I spoke at Michigan, University of Michigan, she was there. My family comes to speak at a different event. My nephew is going to actually fly up from Kansas to introduce me at the Heart to Heart event. He's been wanting to come hear a personal speech of me around my life, so he's going to fly up for that. So I use the venue to find time to spend with family and friends and engage the friends. And my younger brother, we don't get to spend time, and we're very close-knit family. And so he's flying to Australia just to help me out and be there to support me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I really enjoyed interviewing you, Billy, and I think we need to go for another cup of coffee at some point. Maybe I'll join you and your bro in Australia.
That's fine with me. That's the energy you bring. You're talking about me bringing energy. You had the courage to stop me, and we were actually, I'm going to call it clowning around, having fun. That's what prompted the picture.
I know.
Your energy superseded my energy.
No, I doubt that. But it was, I just had to meet your brother. And it was clear you guys were close. Right away, I could see that. So thank you for introducing me. And I enjoyed really having you on the show. And thanks for speaking with our audience about commitment and leadership and culture and the things that you can't measure that are important Really key messages, and I really appreciate that. Thanks for coming to the cafe.
Thank you. It's been an honor, and I really enjoyed being on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now just to give you a few tips on what's coming up or happening now, we have black belt training that includes one-on-one coaching, which answers the prayers of many of our learners. It's $19.99. It comes with 6 hours of one-to-one project coaching with the Master Black Belt. That's a great deal. Also, check out Tracy's webinar coming up this month, June 27th at 11 a.m. Pacific, titled Executive Overview, The Power of Lean Six Sigma. This is a must for leaders or for learners like the one with the question earlier to pass along to leaders so we can help show them how continuous improvement can make their lives easier and their companies stronger. Also, check out our Roundup post where we asked some of last year's Wonder Women of Quality what they were up to. So there's lots to check out.
Yes. Also, Mary Beth German, Director of Operational Innovation in a healthcare organization, is going to be sharing her experiences with dyads in continuous improvement next month on our podcast. And also, come join us this summer in San Diego for the OPEX Leaders Summit Conference. It's put on by IQPC. It's happening August 26th through the 29th of this year. I went last year, and it was one of my favorite conferences. There's about 300 people there, but most people that were there were OPEX leaders, and they were really sharing their stories, their success stories, their challenges. Really great speakers. I would highly recommend it. So it's just big enough to meet a lot of new people, but not too big that you felt like you were just swimming in a bunch of, too many people sometimes is what conferences sometimes feel like. So I'll be there. Elizabeth will be there. And GoLeanSigma.com is going to have a booth there. So come. And San Diego's not a bad place to come in the summer.
No, it's great. Thanks for another great visit to the Just in Time Cafe.
And we will see you next month.